Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the comprehensive yet informal study. Here it is of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. We're here. We're back. Um, we're here at the general note on the system of principles. Last time we were well, yes, we've been in the systematic representation of all synthetic principles. I suppose we're still here. This is the last session in which we'll be here because coming up is a general distinction, or the ground of the distinction of all objects in general into phenomena, noumena. So, big stuff here. You've, throughout the study, heard these terms thrown around a few times. It's because um, Patrick and I, who have been like the consistent people throughout the study, which by the way he's not here this time. Maybe he'll pop in later. Probably not, unfortunately. But Kirk is here with me today. But we've used these terms before. They're really big. And I'll leave it at that. If you're curious how, I mean, you should probably know by now. And if you don't, that means you haven't watched the other episodes or installments, whatever you want to call these. So make sure you go do that because Kant doesn't make a whole lot of sense. At least the Critique of Pure Reason doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Too out of order. It has been noted as well previously in the study that part of the reason it got popular, at least to our historical knowledge, maybe this is just myth or legend, but got this work got popular because it was originally by somebody shortly after its publication. I don't know if it was the first edition in 1781 and second edition in 1787. Regardless, after one of those publications, I believe it was like a priest or theologian or somebody with like ties to religion and philosophy of religion read the book backwards. Um, so he started more with like the end, and you'll see with stuff like this, like phenomena, noumena, stuff like the antinomies, stuff about like God, the soul, the universe, and he's like, oh my God, guys, if you read this book backwards, you'll understand why what he's saying at the beginning matters. Because people couldn't get through the beginning at least the how the story goes. I'm not sure if this is again like verified by historians or anything, but the tale at least is that people had a hard time getting through this book front to backward, like we're doing in the study. And then this one guy read it backwards for some reason, and he was like, "Oh, okay, this book makes sense if you read it backwards." So okay, maybe it makes sense if you read it backwards, but we're reading it forwards. So it won't make much sense if you're following us if you haven't watched it. So please do. And in that light, just a quick review last time to orient ourselves, going from beginning to end, as Kant wrote it. We talked about, we finished the refutation of idealism and talked about, I guess what I could summarize as the limits of the understanding, essentially. I mean, we talked a little bit more about actuality and necessity and possibility, not in that order, and existence, right? The pure laws of the understanding, right? This is like a good thing to look at, by the way. So maybe just pause and read over that. That's a lot of what we were going over last time. So anyway, there was a whole lot there. There's been a whole lot. Refutation of idealism, talking about Berkeley, talking about Descartes, talking about and again, as Pat noted a session or two ago, his Kant's presentation of Berkeley's position seems to be a bit of a straw man, but still, it's important, I think, to acknowledge and just so you can tell that he's arguing against something, even if he calls it Berkeley and it's not actually Berkeley, he's still arguing against what he takes to be Berkeley's view, which is that um, uh, I think it was like space having like space is maybe not something in itself, but something perceived. And so Kant's like, no, it's necessary for. I don't go back to the refutation of idealism, but we also talked about Descartes and like inner and the outer. Now the outer is necessary for the inner, which disproves his "I think therefore I am," at least in the sense of that, like, what is indubitable is only on the inside. No, the outside has to even exist for there to be an inside, was his argument for Descartes, and I remember that a bit better. So anyway, we're past all that now. We're past going over the laws of the understanding. We're just general note in the system of principles. Don't think we're going to find too much more new here, but you never know. And then after this, next session will be phenomena numina. So okay, that's my context. That's my introduction. Um, Hopefully it hasn't been, been too long. Only 5 minutes. Okay, my introduction's generally been like 7 minutes lately, just because there's been so much more than there has before, and very detailed. And I left out a lot of detail, but hopefully enough to at least orient ourselves in what we're doing. So, Kirk, do you have any preliminary remarks or questions about
Well,
anything I've said, or would you just want to get going?
I'm good.
Cool. Would you like to read, or do you want me to start?
How about you start, and then I can start. I mean, what do you want?
Um, Whatever you want. It
Oh,
seemed like
I'll start.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. It is very remarkable that we cannot have insight into the possibility of anything in accordance with the mere categories, but we must always have available an intuition in order for it to take display the objective reality of the pure concept of the understanding. Take, e.g., the categories of determination of other things, i.e., can be substance or how to, because something is, something else must be, and thus how something can be a cause at all. However, several things exist from the existence of one of them. Something about the others follows and vice versa. And in this way, a community of substances can obtain. Insight into these cannot be had from mere concepts at all. The same thing also holds of the other categories, e.g., how can a thing be one with the number of others taken together, i.e., be a magnitude, just as long as intuition is lacking. One does not know whether one thinks an object through the categories and whether there can ever be any object that even fits them, and so it is confirmed that the categories are not by themselves cognitions, but mere forms of thought, making cognitions out of given intuitions. In the same way, it follows that no synthetic proposition can be made out of mere categories, e.g., in all existence there's substance, i.e., something can exist only as subject and never as mere predicate, or everything is a quantum, e.g., etc. If there's not, if there's nothing, uh, wait, that we can use in order to go beyond the given concept and thereby connect it with another. Hence, also, no one has ever succeeded in proving a synthetic proposition merely from pure concepts of the understanding, e.g., the proposition every contingently existing thing has a cause. One could never get further than to prove that without this relation, we could not comprehend the existence of the contingent at all, i.e., cognize the existence of such a thing a priori through the unit understanding from which, however, it does not follow that this is also the condition of the possibility of things themselves. Here, if one would look back on our proof of the principle of causality, one will become aware that we could prove it only of objects of possible experience. Everything that happens, every occurrence, presupposes a cause, and indeed, we could prove it only as a principle of the possibility of experience. Hence, of the cognition of an object given an empirical intuition, not from mere concepts. That the proposition everything contingent must have the cause very self-evident to everyone from mere concepts is not to be denied, but then the concept of contingent is already taken in such a way that it contains not the category of modality as something, the non-existence of which can be thought, but that is relation as something that can only exist as a consequence of something else, and then it is, of course, an identical proposition, but can only exist as a consequence of its cause. In fact, when we are to give examples of contingent existence, we are to appeal to alterations and not merely to the possibility of the thought of the opposite. Alteration, however, is an occurrence that is possible as such only through a cause, the non-being of which is thus possible in itself, and thus one cognizes contingency from the fact that something can exist only as the effect of a cause. Thus, if a thing is assumed to be contingent, it's an analytic proposition to say that it has a cause.
Okay, thank you. That was pretty beefy. As I say a lot, because Kant has a lot of things like this, where this is like God knows how many lines this is. I mean, what is this? 288? No, actually, no. This isn't just one line here. This is many lines. This is big. It's over a page long. So just a straight paragraph. But thank you, Kirk, for getting through that. That was a lot. So let's break this down. Okay, the beginning of this paragraph I took to be um kind of saying how it's almost um like a, I don't know if discursive is the right word, but it's sort of like a self-aware kind of like humor almost. He's like it's very remarkable, right? It's kind of funny that like to have like we can't just have insights about the categories themselves, but only how only how they relate to conditions of experience. So and then he gives some examples, right? Yeah, only have it as available for intuition to display objective reality, the pure concept of the understanding. So the concept always, and this is sort of like, right? I think Hegel, like, not to get too off track here, but one of the main ideas in Hegel and just seeing Kant's influence really resonate even in like the later developments that would become, like later German idealism. Something that sticks around, at least in Hegel, is this idea that the concept doesn't just remain in abstraction. The concept, rather, is only a concept when it is objectified in objective reality. Of course, Hegel thinks this
You're
is how.
criticizing like extreme rationalism.
Exactly, right, exactly. Yes, precisely. And then, I mean, he does that. I was going to bring that up a little later, but yeah, since you bring that up now, um, sorry, my dog is barking. Yeah, since you bring that up now, yeah, it is to attack that as yeah, correct, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Yes, because it has to be objectified. It cannot merely be remain in the abstract. That's when he starts talking about right, like every contingency existing thing has a cause. We cannot comprehend the existence. Uh, right, we can't do this with things in themselves. Um, which Kant takes to be abstract. Of course, like Hegel, like right, going back to what I just said, Hegel probably would say that we can do this, but that's because Hegel, for things in themselves, are actualized in our phenomenal experience. For Kant, they are not. So that explains that difference. But what Kant is drawing a line here is between him and someone like Spinoza, who does think we can just take the concept purely as concept, right? As rational, or like you said, Kirk, very rightly, just a rational thing, right? Spinoza is trying to, um, um, as far as I can tell, at least reading the Ethics, uh, extract away and then analyze the concept and then like show its sort of like manifestations in reality. Um, in 1 second, hang on. Sorry, my dog is just really being annoying. I'm going to just step away for a second. No, it's okay. It's not you. Okay. Well, sorry about that interruption. Ugh. Maybe we'll try to edit that out. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Let me get back to Kirk. Okay, sorry about that interruption.
I
um,
wonder. So
yeah,
this would apply to like all rationalists, not just Spinoza. It also applied to like Leibniz and Christian Wolff and
yeah, yep.
Descartes. But I don't know how, if because I've heard Kant in the Critique of Reason. So far, I've heard him critique Leibniz. I've heard him critique Spinoza. I've heard him critique Descartes. I don't know if he's mentioned Wolff yet, but I've heard
He
that's
will.
one of the
He
people
will.
he calls out.
Um, I've read ahead a little bit, especially like for class. He will mention Wolf in this, and that'll come up later. So I'll just say that for now. Like I would try to like maybe make an example. I'm personally not as familiar with Wolf's philosophy specifically. I don't think I've actually ever read Wolf myself, like primary like the primary source Wolf or anything. So um,
Yeah, but I just heard I haven't either. It's just I heard he was one of the people who gets called out for rationalism.
he does, and all I'll say for now is that we'll get there, and we'll see that as it comes up. But yeah, no, you're right, Kirk. Yeah, precisely. So, um, Yeah, he's attacking rationalism. I mean, I don't just want to say that. Um, I want to like definitely expand like that's why because the categories of thought, the pure concepts of the understanding, which the same thing, um, they have to be they are for objective reality. They're not merely for themselves in the abstract. And then he gives some examples. Anyway, sorry, hang on, just reorienting myself really quickly. Go back to what I was saying in the beginning. He, right, to me, at least me reading this, it's kind of remarkable. It's kind of funny because he's like, on the one hand, it's like, yes, they need to be like displayed in objective reality, but then on the other hand, Kant is kind of like exploring how that's possible through transcendental philosophy. Right, like how something can exist only as subject, not merely determination of other things. It could be a substance, or something else. Right, community of substances can obtain. Right, we saw it through causality. These are all things that we've talked about earlier. It's like analogies of experience, postulates of understand of empirical um, cognition, I think, or experience or something. Um, but so it may seem funny that he's doing that, right? It may be maybe kind of like remarkable that we can't have insight into the mere categories themselves. Um, which you may be like, hey, Kant, aren't you kind of looking into the categories themselves as separated from intuition? Because that's kind of what he's doing, right? In some sense, he's separating the critique into the transcendental aesthetic and the transcendental logic, and so not that those are the only divisions and there are many subdivisions, but generally that's like a big division he does make. So you could say maybe, hey, Kant, how can you do that if you say right here that you can't really analyze the concepts themselves without, acknowledging their intuitions and objective reality? And his answer is that well, thus, as long as an intuition is lacking, one does not know whether one thinks an object through the categories and whether there can ever be in any object that fits them. So it is confirmed with the categories themselves are not cognitions, but forms of thought given to. So Kant's saying, look, I'm not saying I'm cognizing these concepts, these pure concepts of the understanding. I'm not cognizing them. He's merely doing transcendental philosophy um, in his already synthesized cognition and reflecting upon the categories as forms of thought for making cognitions out of given intuitions. So he's not doing what he's accusing the rationalists of doing here. He's not he's not analyzing concepts in themselves. He's sort of dividing them into like their respective parts based on their like limitations almost, right, and what they can't do, because Kant's saying, right, understanding can't intuit, and the intuition can't understand, can't combine, right, can't synthesize. So he's almost defining them through their limitations, but acknowledging that he is reflecting upon this. I mean, he doesn't say that directly, but he's sort of just saying they're not by themselves cognitions, they're forms of thought. And what he's doing in this critique of pure reason, right? um, um, very remarkably, he's not having insights into the mere categories. He's merely reflecting on the understanding as forms of thought for making cognitions out of intuitions, which he's able to do because he's having a cognition in the first place. Um, his manifold is unified, and he's thinking as well as like intuiting, and it's all coming together as was described in the transcendental deduction and following the rules, specifically found in the subsections after the transcendental deduction up until now. And in that he is able to reflect. So it's not that he is just analyzing these things. He's more so reflecting upon the cognition that is already happening. Um, which is not what the rationalists are doing, right? The rationalists aren't reflecting upon cognition. They're isolating an aspect of cognition, namely the concepts, and trying to derive um, syntheses. They're trying to derive syntheses out of concepts, which doesn't happen, right? Concepts don't synthesize um, themselves. They are tools for synthesizing the manifold. Hence, all of these claims, all these synthetic propositions must take place within the within the limits of the manifold of pure intuition of space and time. Hence, he says, one could never get wait, where is it? Hence, if one will look back on our proof of the principle of causality, one will become aware that we could prove it only of objects of possible experience. We can't prove this as a general law. Causality is not a general law of things themselves. It's not a rule of things themselves. It's not a rule of the concepts themselves. Concepts don't have causes and effects. They're merely forms of thought. Um, and so causes and effects can only apply to objects of possible experience. In other words, Spinoza, who claims God is the cause of himself, right? That can't happen. That makes no sense in a Kantian framework. Uh, God is not an intuition, which we'll see later on. So, anyway, I think I'll leave that there. I think that makes sense. Um, and then there's even more. Going back to my earlier comment, this is a beefy paragraph. Um, um, right, he just keeps going on about that. Alteration is not an occurrence that follows such through a cause, the non-being of which is possible in itself, and this one cause contingent. Oh, this is interesting. He goes into contingency. At the proposition, everything must cause may be evident to everyone from mere concepts, not to be denied. But then the concept of contingent is already taken in such a way that it contains not the category modality of relation. So this is interesting. He's sort of saying, like, it's my understanding, saying something is contingent is sort of acknowledging its so it's not merely a thought of the opposite, right? So let's just take an event. Like, let's say today, like I went to Wawa this morning. Okay, that's contingent, right? Because um, not well. Okay, the usual thing, everyday understanding. What I think Kant is trying to correct, like okay, I went to Wawa this morning. A lot of people would say, well, that's contingent. Why? It is possible that I could have done the opposite. I could have not gone to Wawa, right? Okay. But Kant's saying there's more to the story here. We appeal to alterations, not really possible. So it's not that I could have done the opposite, but it's that um, as far as if I'm understanding this correctly, what can only exist as a consequence has its cause. Um, we're still sort of acknowledging, I think, that like, for example, me not going to Wawa, right? That non-being, um, it still has relation, still, right? Something that can only exist as the consequence of something else. So even if I did not go to Wawa, that would still have alteration. That would still have cause and effect. There would be a cause as to why I did not go to Wawa. Um, in terms of this, in terms of phenomenon, right? In terms of objects of experience, like me going to Wawa involves objects of possible, like the domain of that claim is within the possible experience, right? And it involves everything in that is an object of a possible experience, like me, Wawa, like going as like an act, right? It's all an experience. So, alteration, however, is an occurrence that is possible as such only through a cause, right? Which said that. So, like, yeah, like the non-being of which is thus possible in itself. Non-being is possible through causation. and thus one cognizes contingency from the fact that something can exist only as the effect of a cause. Thus, if a thing is assumed to be a contingent, it's an analytic proposition to say it has a cause. Right. So if something is contingent, it has a cause. I didn't go. Um, I went to Wawa. That has a cause. Um, not only does it have an opposite, it has relation. Just like if I didn't go to Wawa, right? It would still have alteration. I could think of the opposite. I did go to Wawa, so it's sort of like, and this is sort of like, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into this because it's already pretty long. But like free will, right? It's like the conversation around free will with German idealism really starts to, bless you, fall apart here because things just aren't contingent and necessary anymore. Everything sort of involves alterations. Everything sort of involves causality, and so like. Actually, I guess this is even something that goes back to Spinoza. It's just the difference here. Kant, it's objects of possible experience. Spinoza, it's just being, I guess. Even just the concept. So, okay, that was a lot. Kirk, do you have any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, the only question I have would be like, I don't know what exactly the different German idealists' thoughts on like what free will would be like. Because like I know Schopenhauer, for example, denied free will, but like I
Yeah.
don't know, did Schelling also believe in free will, or believe in free will as opposed to the other ones, or
Um. To be honest, it's not something I know a whole lot about. From what little I do know about it, it's that the conversation has just totally changed. Freedom and necessity sort of converge in the sense
yeah,
of
that's
like,
yeah,
well, what is freedom? Um, like it's a sort of, I think, even like, it's really similar to Spinoza, really, which is why I was saying it goes back to Spinoza. It's like freedom is now defined as like following, like doing what is in your nature is freeing, as opposed to like not doing that.
it's like the opposite of like the French conception of free will,
Which is, I don't think I'm familiar.
like the French existentialists, like the radical freedom.
I don't know what that is.
Well, the French existentialists, like they had this idea that like if you don't follow your freedom, you're like you have radical free will to do anything, and if you don't, you're acting in bad faith or whatever. Like that's like the French existentialists, my understanding, like of what I
Oh, I
understand
mean,
free will.
yeah, I guess that's like similar.
But it
Um,
seems like it would be like the opposite, because like the French are saying that like you can do anything where your consciousness is like you have the free will to do anything, whereas like Spinoza would say, well, you can't do free will to do anything, but that's actually more freeing, if that
well,
makes
it's sort
sense.
of like a false scenario, and here's why. Um, for you to have like free, okay, so let's just take like the usual debate, right, about free will, and it usually goes like, are we free? Well, like some people like think yes, because we can make choices that we are the first cause of, and some people think no, because we are part of a larger system that like determines what we do. And so the reason that that whole debate kind of falls apart with thought such as this, like Spinoza, Kant, Schelling, is because that whole picture kind of falls apart. That whole debate kind of relies on this assumption that the human being is like separate from its environment, that it can either be caused by, like it can either like be influenced by, or it can like have influence over. And that sort of just dissolves, right? Because Spinoza, everything is being, it's like saying like, is like, does the atom have like, or does, I don't even know what a good example would be, like does like does the flower have free will if it grows? It's like it's just doing what it does. And it's not
No, but
really.
I think that would be like the opposite of the French existentialist view of free will, is what I'm saying. From what I understand of them.
Sure, okay, I
Like
guess
I don't
so.
know much about it, but like as I
I don't either.
understand, I just like I've heard that like they had the idea that like the French existentialists had the idea that you could like free will means the ability to like have influence over nature without like any sort of like constraints, and like that would be like the opposite. But like again, I don't know as much about this, but
Well, again,
Yeah.
here nature and like it sort of falls apart here, right? Because Kant is saying
Yeah.
everything, even what we can conceive of as contingent, right? Which is sort of like what like the free will debate is about. Like, is there a contingency or is everything determined? I mean, I guess you could argue that it's all like hard determinism, but it's such a radical determinism that it like the whole picture kind of falls apart because there stops being a determined and a determiner. It's all sort of one big system. And now again, it's important to note the difference that Kant is especially trying to make here clear here. For Spinoza, that applies to being in general, like right being in itself. Kant is just saying uh, this applies to experience. Doesn't apply to things in themselves. Doesn't apply to even concepts in such a way that, right? Because like God is nature, right? God just cause, right? It's sort of like right. It no like that just isn't even a thing possible in Kant because there can't be a self-caused cause because that we don't have a concept of that. We only have the 12 categories that function to synthesize the manifold, and only through that do we get something like a causality, something like a PSR, right? Something like every effect has a cause. Um, only an experience for Kant. No self-causing God in Kant. And we'll see the consequences of that later. Anyway, so does that all make sense, Kirk?
Yeah, yeah. I was just making like a comparison from like what I've seen, like a different conceptualization people have of free will.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely different. For sure. Yeah, from what you've told me, it is different.
Yeah, I mean, I'd
Cool.
have to look more into like what the arguments are, but like, yeah.
Yeah.
But in any event, I'll read next, and then we can.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Cool.
gonna be
Yeah.
done with it
We're
soon.
what's that?
Are we gonna be done with this study soon?
Yeah, I would like to try to finish this.
Okay, so do you want me to just like read like one more like paragraph, or like how many more paragraphs do you think you want to read?
Um. So we finished this. We've got to read this one, which goes down to another long one here. Then we've got to read this one, and then this one. So there
Oh,
there are three. If you want, we can break it up into like a part one and part two and do this next time.
are you sure we don't just want to maybe do like this one big one? Cause like,
If you're up for it, it just sounds like you're a little like tired, which is fine. I am
no,
too, but
we can do all three if you want, but I would personally I would prefer if we just do just one big one, and then we could do the other two next one.
yeah, that sounds fine with me.
Okay, sure.
Cool. So you wanna read this one?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let me see. So it is even more remarkable, however, that in order to understand the possibility of things in accordance with the categories and thus to establish the objective reality of the latter, we do not merely need intuitions, but always outer intuitions. If we take, e.g., the pure concept of relation, we find that one, in order to give something that persists in intuition corresponding to the concept of substance and thereby to establish the objective reality of this concept, an intuition in space of matter, since space alone persistently determines well time, however, and thus everything that is in an inner sense constantly flows. In order to exhibit alteration as the intuition corresponding to the concept of causality, we must take motion as alteration in space as our example. Indeed, only by that means can we make alterations, the possibility of which cannot be comprehended by any pure understanding.
Let me just see where this sorry, this thing is. From what the fuck? Oh, this is from this. Okay. This is just from what we were talking about before. Okay, so let's just keep moving on.
Okay. Intuitable. Alteration is a combination of contradictorily opposed determinations in the existence of one and the same thing. Now, how it determines the existence of one, now how it is possible, rather, I got that mixed up, that from a given state, an opposed state of the same thing should follow. Not only can be not be made comprehensible by reason without an example, but cannot even be made understandable without intuition. And this intuition is the motion of a point in space, the existence of which is in different places as a sequence of opposed determinations. First makes alteration intuitable to us, for in order to subsequently. To make even inner alterations thinkable, we must be able to grasp time as the form of inner sense, figuratively through a line, and grasp the inner alteration through the drawing of this line motion, and thus grasp the successive existence of ourself in different states through our outer intuition, the real ground of which is that all alteration presupposes something that persists in intuition, even in order merely to be perceived as alteration. But there's no persistent intuition to be found in inner sense. Finally, the possibility of the category of community is not to be comprehended at all through mere reason, and thus it is not possible to have insight into the objective reality of this concept without intuition. Indeed, outer intuition in space. For how would one conceive the possibility that if several substances exist, the existence of the one can follow reciprocally from the existence of the other as an effect, and thus that because there's something in the former, there must on that account also be something in the other that cannot be understood from the existence of the latter alone. For this is requisite for each community, um, but it's not even comprehensible among things each of which is entirely isolated from the other's true subsistence. I mean, hence Leibniz, who ascribed a community to substances of the world only as conceived by the understanding alone, needed divinity for mediation, and from their existence alone is community, or at least into him incomprehensible. But we can readily grasp the possibility of community of substances as appearances if we represent them in space, thus not our intuition. For this already contains itself in a priori formal outer relations as conditions of possibility of the real, in effect and countereffect, thus in community. It can just as easily be established that the possibility of things as magnitudes, and thus the objective reality of the category of magnitude, can also be exhibited only in outer intuition, and by means of that alone can it subsequently uh, also be applied to inner sense. But in order to avoid being long-winded, I must leave the examples of this to the reader's judgment.
All right, we need a button for that. just, uh, come on,
Oh,
really?
because he's saying not to be long-winded, but
Exactly.
Bruh.
Not to be long-winded after giving us a fucking, oh my god, over a page-long paragraph.
this has been. I mean, these are pretty beefy paragraphs. This is why I want to end it a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, and I'm glad we came to that agreement, and I appreciate that suggestion.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. Bye. You get your goddamn ugly ass on.
Okay. Fun and games aside. Oh my god. Okay. Okay. Let's just break this down right from the start to beginning. Or, oh my god, I'm so tired. Yeah, it's a good thing we're stopping after this. Holy shit. From the start to the end. Okay. Objective reality. We need outer intuitions for objective reality. For example, relation. If something persists, we need to have substance. If we have substance, we need space. Because what is substance? Something that persists in space. Over time. So time is involved, but we need space. However, then he gets into the fact that we need time, right? Because substance, right? Space alone determines while in time, however, thus everything in essence constantly flows. So like, right, substance stays is persists over time. All right. So then we need to exhibit alteration, right? Because things need to change about the substance, right? Again, go back to Descartes, to the candle wax. We have a candle. It is solid wax. Then the wax melts. We know that both in the solid form and in the melted liquid form, it is still the candle. Why? Because the candle is a substance that we've intuited as an intuition, and through the understanding, we have cognized it in such a way that allows it to allows it not only to be solid and then melt, but to, like, as separate instances of being, but for that to happen in a succession and for us to understand that it is still the candle. That is exactly what he's talking about here. He's saying that, there is space and time, and then we have an empirical intuition of the candle, and we apply concepts, the categories of the pure understanding, as well as empirical concept like the name candle, and we it all comes together in the unity of our perception. The perception is unified, so that in one moment, right, through the transcendental schema, through the imagination, which follow the laws of the analogy's experience, which follow the postulates of empirical um, experience, I'll just call it, um, postulates of empirical experience. It follows all those rules to give us the sensation, the experience. Well, not just the sensation, right? But the experience of the candle first being there, is solid, and then things happen to it chemically, which we're still perceiving, understanding through causality, right, over time, and then it becomes wax, and we can understand all of that because of substance, and substance can be it can exist as a concept because it's a concept that is applied to space and time, right? Alteration that happens through right alter how is possible against like reason concerning without intuition point space, right? You're still talking about space here, right? Inner alterations thinkable, and must be able to grasp time as well as space, which is also how motion happens, right? Grasp the inner alteration, the drawing of this line. Which line? The line that we represent time with, which again is still something I find a little dubious. I think we can like sense time without having to draw the fucking line, but still you can be sympathetic, I think, to what he's saying, right? Because if we're trying to explain like something that happens in time, we might like we in our heads, even if we don't literally imagine like visually a line, we imagine it in a sequential order that can be represented through a line. So I feel like that is at least is and that is motion, right? Things move. There is like that, right? That's how through this just intuitive, right, inner sense of like inner alteration, um we've grasped inner alteration, right? And we've expressed it externally in the form of something like flip notes, right? Or movies, right? We have successive images that are in a line, right? Say like for example a line of film, and just play out one after another in such a way that they successfully follow one another and appear to be moving, right? The moving image happens when you have a bunch of images at once together on a single line of film, so it comes together to become a single movie, right? As we would call it, or a single film. Um, Kant's basically saying that's what happens metaphysically. For us to experience as a movie, experience is a bunch of that's what perception is, right? In terms of not just the individual experiences, but the time, like space and time, really making those, right? We have like the film itself and the film extended in a line in such a way that it is time, and that is how. And then and what is that? How is that film organized through the concepts of the understanding? And then we have things like substance, like motion. Okay. We also have things like community through that, right? We have things existing at the same time, right? It's like in a movie, right? If you're shooting a movie and you have things existing at the same time, presumably even like off camera, right? Which I guess is a little weirder with the movie analogy, because literally what exists in the movie is captured on camera, so maybe it's not the best example. But at least just in our common, everyday experience, right? Things still exist even though we're not actively perceiving them, right? This is so he mentions Leibniz here, right? Leibniz struggled with this, so he needed to come up with the idea of where is it? needed a divinity for mediation, right? So, all right, for things to exist. But he also previously mentioned Berkeley, right? Berkeley also, to my understanding, posited God as the ultimate perceiver. So things still exist when we don't look at them. Um, how is this possible? Because of community through causality, through space, through outer sense, as well as right causality inherently having alteration, right, due to inner sense. So it's this mix of inner and outer sense, um, unified through the understanding that allows for the concepts such as community, but only applied to experience. This makes no sense if we're not talking about space and time. No sense at all. Hence, the explanations of divinity kind of being dubious, right? And not really making any sense at all in this framework, really. If God is outside of space and time, how does he mediate things in space and time? Is God even in space and time? Not really, right? Not in the sense that Leibniz and Berkeley mean anyway. Doesn't really follow. So how can it be that these things in space and time still exist in a community, even if we're not perceiving them? Through community, through the understanding, combining the manifold in such a way. Okay. And that's pretty long-winded, and then he goes, well, I'm not going to give you examples of that, even though I gave the example. He could just be like, please refer to Descartes' wax, but no, he's just extremely unhelpful and already was long-winded. It's just said he wasn't going to be long-winded, so fuck you, Kant. No, I'm just kidding, but that seems silly. Okay. Kirk, I know you wanted to leave it there, but are you okay if I just finish up this last little bit?
Okay, fine. We can, but like, okay.
We'll wrap it up after that. Okay. Just because there's a little bit left. This entire remark is of great importance, not only in order to confirm our preceding refutation of idealism, but even more when we come to talk of self-cognition from mere inner consciousness and the determination of our nature without the assistance of outer empirical intuitions, to indicate to us the limits of possibility of such a cognition. For some reason, I don't know, I have Hegel brain today. Like, how does self-cognition work in Hegel when you have, like, other people recognizing you? What is that? That's outer empirical intuition, baby. Anyway, to indicate but he follows up here to indicate to us the limits of the possibility of such a cognition. So that's interesting, right? Which also is like Hegel, right? We only exist insofar as, like, if we don't meet other people, right? We only exist insofar as right, this is even getting into Marx, right, in politics, which is interesting, right? The we exist insofar as we like produce things, right, which is I mean, not the best understanding of Marx, but that seems to be at least recall reading in early Marx sort of thing, and that you can see the roots of that not only in Hegel but in here, even in Kant in the Critique of Pure Reason. You can see that, right? Our self-cognition from mere inner consciousness is determined, right, without these outer empirical intuitions. So we need outer empirical intuitions, presumably cognitions, right, as well, right? That only then do we develop self-cognition of inner consciousness. So, all right, so that's that. Then the final conclusion of this entire section is thus. This is the conclusion, the final conclusion of this entire section. All principles of the pure understanding are nothing further than a priori principles of the possibility of experience. So again, it's the possibility of experience. Not everything in experience, is necessarily always going to be following one of these rules in such a specific way, right? Just because, like, what do I mean by that? Just because we have the causality, just because we need causality to make sense of experience, doesn't mean you can actually pick out like instances of causality in experience. That's still pretty dubious, and Hume was pretty onto something there. It's just Hume was saying, therefore, causality as a whole is a hack concept, and Kant's like, no, it's actually possibility experience, but it's merely an a priori principle. That's really all it is. And all synthetic a priori positions are related to the latter alone, and indeed their possibility itself rests entirely in its relation. Okay. which is a perfect transition into phenomena noumena, because noumena, spoiler alert, Kant will talk about what happens when we try to use the concepts of the pure understanding to talk about things that don't apply to objects of possible experience. And make synthetic a priori propositions that are not related to the principles of possibility experience, but rather concepts in themselves. It gets real freaky, but we'll see that we'll see for that next time. Okay, Kirk, any closing remarks?
Nope. That sounds about right.
All right, Kantian wisdom of the day. Don't go out of do not go out of don't go out of the possibility of experience when trying to form synthetic a priori propositions. Perfect. We'll see you next time for some phenomena noumena. Bye bye.